this would have been the actual title of tonight's talk if you'd your invitation that you kindly responded to, because it's a big area and it's a big topic and a big talk. So we'll attempt to go through it with some experience stuff, and really what you get tonight is kind of the actual on the ground experience from Prachi and some of the theory from me. But this is a much simpler title. The work visualization at scale is actually the essence of what we're trying to do, because growing things ruins things, basically. As you get bigger, things get so much harder. And we're able to reflect tonight on some of our own experience, but equally a long history of things that are growing. Now, who's this for? That's probably what sort of audience are we looking for here tonight?
So today's talk, we are trying to focus on the three big things. One, it is going to be for managers and executives who want to make sustainable and inclusive decisions. Secondly, it is focused on team leaders. It will help you figure out how to facilitate a lot of the dependencies, blockers, and taking that information and translating into the actions. And then thirdly, and really very important, is for the team members. The folks who are working on different teams, how would this help them align with the purpose? So the work they are doing, how does that get aligned to the purpose, but also to have that sense of progress? And let me tell you, Nigel, this entire work visualization became very common in terms of Obeya in 90s when Toyota was trying to launch Prius. And it was in a very complex environment, the environment that we are going to be talking about today even more, and against very tight timelines. And that's where they figured out that, visualization of work and figuring out where the bottlenecks are, what are the different dependencies, how things are coming together was really helpful for them. But this concept of Obeya is not that recent. It's only gained that popularity in 90s. It dates back to thousands of years ago. And we're going to get into a bit more details as we dig deeper into the philosophy behind Obeya.
Yeah. Which is my job as well. Those are the things I love. I love a bit of history and philosophy and storytelling along the way. So I wonder if any of those people in the room, does anyone here identify with being an executive, Rob? So do we attract anyone who might be an executive? Yeah, someone who's a leader in an organization. Maybe the Obeya stuff will work for you. Immediate exit from the room as a result. What about a team leader or a manager? Is that someone who might, yep, that's great. We had a couple of those. And the rest of you are all team members and contributors and getting the job done. That'll be right? Something for everyone tonight, that's for sure. Now introductions of us.
Yeah, we know our audience.
Yeah, exactly.
We should introduce ourselves.
Okay, so we're going to do this. I'm going to introduce Prachi and she's going to introduce me. And this is the embarrass each other kind of conversation. Let's make it as quick as possible. So I've worked with Prachi for the last couple of years. And before that, I was, doing other jobs, none as important as this one. And I have the great pleasure of working with Prachi on a pretty big project. And I get to see how she is an archetype of ThoughtWorkers, but without bragging about ThoughtWorks too much. Brave and smart are the two words I apply for Prachi and me working alongside her. I've got a lot of scars from being brave and stupid in my time. And so it's really wonderful to work with someone who not only knows the theory, but applies that on some projects. Really, most of the things we get to work on, it's not just a matter of process. It is a matter of creating organizational culture at the same time, which is an interesting juggle to try and create. So 15 years, not all of that at ThoughtWorks, but been a ThoughtWorker for some time around the world, and scale is, I think, probably the third word I'd associate. Big stuff doesn't seem to frighten you, Prachi.
Thank you so much, Nigel. That was very humbling. But I would let you all know that I'm very privileged to share this space and deliver this talk alongside Nigel Dalton. Now, Nigel is trained social scientist, and in his current job at ThoughtWorks, he's playing the role of social scientist, and we'll dig deeper into what that really means. But his career can be divided into two parts. One before Agile, where he was trained in PMBOK, PMO, Waterfall, and all sorts of things in that era. And then he traveled to United and Microsoft.
Do not forget to mention my certificate in Microsoft project.
Absolutely. And then he traveled to United States in 2000. And like a reformed snooker, he got introduced to Agile and never looked back. So much so that his curiosity around lean and Agile led him to be the director of Lean Enterprise Institute, which is the peak body of Lean globally. Also, from career perspective, he has done it all from large financial organizations to scale-ups to startups. And a lot of you, his view today is really, really key, because when I asked Nigel about this talk, I wanted to get an executive view. And a lot of you might know that he has played that role of CIO as part of our group and head of research and development as well. But I guess for a lot of us, Nigel has been an amazing mentor, an empathetic leader. And we're going to also explore how Obeya enables you to be one of those. But really important thing is the role of social scientists. Nigel focuses on the complex and techno-social nature of the organizations. So yeah, that's Nigel for us tonight.
Yeah, so we're not going to obsess about this. I could talk all night about this, the Toyota Prius Obeya that was created to manage the massively parallel stream of work that it took, because a CEO labeled a project G21, Global 21st Century, and they were on an incredible deadline to get an electric or hybrid car in the market. You know, I think a few of you are probably familiar with that kind of CEO behavior, and we're talking about that tonight. Now, what I also am is the chief meme officer of Thoughtworks, and I do love a cartoon and a meme and a story and those kind of things. And I think some people have come to our talk this time expecting this is going to be the battle of King Kong, the program management office, the American monster of the last 25 years, and Godzilla, the Japanese Obeya, obscure, fantastic comic character. And that's what the battle could be about. And this would be a fun talk.
Yeah, but we're here to talk about more serious topics, so no more cartoons, Nigel.
Okay, and to my disappointment,
we lied again.
Might have sneaked this one in, and because it's the scene setter for me. If I look back over that, I hate to say it, like 40 years of working now, there's been a massive transformation, and a big part of that is VUCA. Now, you're hearing it a bit more often: volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Now, there's a cartoon here because that understanding of battlefields started to play out in the 60s, where Lichtenstein's art comes from, through to the 80s. And by the 80s, they had words for it, that the Cold War had delivered a different battlefield that was incredibly changing and really uncertain. And the complexity of and the interconnectedness was remarkable and a little bit ambiguous. This was a whole new battlefield for people to manage on. And my thesis tonight is quite simple, is that the Japanese post-war economy, the 60s, 70s, and 80s, came across some things that we didn't have to face in the West until the internet really hit us at scale, and particularly Web 2.0 with social and the massive interconnectedness of people. So that's my thesis.
Yeah, so that's good to know about VUCA, Nigel, because in my day-to-day job, I deal with a lot of VUCA. And whether it is scaled transformation, scale delivery, or it is a startup getting to the scale-up level, trying to launch new products. There are different kind of things, but all we know is that there's level of complexity which keeps on increasing. There's a volatility all around us right now. And so what has helped me to sort of figure out this VUCA, and there's a very good acronym that VUCA World has introduced, which is to deal with VUCA, you need VUCA. Now, what is that VUCA? It's visibility, understanding, clarity, and agility. So creating the vision is very important, so that when things start changing, when there's a lot of volatility, you still know what is the vision of the organization or what you're trying to do as a group, right? And that vision is always set. So parts around that hypothesis, bets could change, but your vision would still remain the same. So that's the vision. Then there's understanding the interconnections. Now, when you start understanding the different forces in play, understand the different interconnections, and make it more transparent, that helps you create the clarity, which brings us to the third bit, which is clarity, which is very important because you need to have the clarity to figure out where you want to focus your energy. So you've got multiple teams. Where is their focus going to be? And that's the clarity we try to create with Obeya as well. And lastly, agility. How easily can you adapt to the changes? Now, VUCA is all about changes and new things coming every now and then. So how quickly can you adapt to those changes? And what are your systems in place which will help you to get there? So that's where VUCA for me is sort of the way of dealing with that.
And that's why you're here, because I can only remember one acronym at a time. So I'll go the old VUCA, you go the new VUCA. Now, in terms of old, it's kind of like, for me, it's explaining why we believe what we believe and why we stick to stuff. And this is the sort of social scientist in me who becomes fascinated by this. And one of them is we actually have, from a psychology sense, we have a really poor relationship with uncertainty and a really poor relationship with complexity. As humans with brains, we avoid those like the plague. The other is, for 100 years, we had a way of working that worked perfectly well when products lasted a long time, that we had 5-year life cycles, and things weren't as volatile. I mean, COVID has taught us, if nothing else, a really pressure-cooked example of how a volatile world can change quickly. So this is why we still have program management officers, is because they're still teaching this stuff. And Frederick Taylor, 1911, published On Scientific Management as a book. His simple thesis was that people were generally evil. And in working with Henry Ford along the way, he said, you know what? These lazy Irish immigrant workers who work in Detroit and all of the factories in North America, they only succeed through management. So this is the establishment of management as a discipline. And he particularly identified 7 types of managers required to successfully build or deliver anything: the inspector, the gang boss, the speed boss, the repair boss, the time clerk, the route clerk, and the disciplinarian. Those roles were 7 people in a successful workplace back in the day. Now, sadly for me, I see those roles evident in traditional PMOs today. Well, that was fantastic when you were moving pig iron around or creating Ford cars, and it was all about individual piecework. And there was an infinitely substitutable number of people who could backfill. Henry Gantt was a friend of both Taylor and Ford, and he created a chart for finding the perfect worker. The perfect worker, and I recommend reading Taylor's book. It's actually pretty readable, apart from the deep racism in it, which you'll get over. But he identified Schmidt as the perfect worker, which was a real person. Schmidt was the person who could move the most pig iron. I say that carefully as a Kiwi because it sounds like pug iron, which isn't a thing. Raw material for making steel in an hour. And he just wanted to find Schmidt and then another Schmidt and another Schmidt, and they would just eliminate people as what became known as human resources. That term came out of this era. And he would just find who was wasting the most time, and that enabled you to fire them and find another worker. Not the happiest kind of person in his life, largely unchanged to this day, to be honest. And the artificiality and the temporal nature of those, not great. Our third evil 100-year-old practice is budgeting. And McKinsey, James McKinsey with McKinsey and Associates, and Alfred P. Sloan, who went on to form a management school, they figured out the thing that has taken up so much of my life: budgets. An abstraction of a future that didn't face any kind of volatility or uncertainty, because how do I know if we're going to do $23,672 in sales in March 2024? A budget, sure, abstract that away. That'll be absolutely fine. That's the last history lesson from me, Prachi. It's all good.
So Nigel, you earlier mentioned that it's a jungle out there, right? And that's what focus of our talk as well was. Now, this concept of jungle, or this metaphor of jungle versus zoo, was introduced by Sonia Blignaut. And she writes a lot about complex adaptive systems on Medium. So if you're interested, definitely read her up. And she has used this metaphor to compare the world that was there probably a few decades ago in terms of the work environment that was set up, as against what's happening today. So I recently had an experience of going to zoo with my kids. And that's where I figured out that, you know, how predictable zoo is. You have known knowns, you have known unknowns. You know that you're going to go to zoo, you're going to have concrete pathways, so you can take your pram there. You know, there are going to be some cafes and restaurants inside, so you can buy some food if you need to. Also, you get a map. So if you want to get to the kangaroo enclosure, you're going to go there and you will see the kangaroos. You're not going to see something else there, unless you take the longer route and you go through the giraffe and then somebody else. And that's sort of known knowns. And then there are some unknown, known unknowns, which are like maybe some animals were sick, so you couldn't see them, or your kid wanted an ice cream and the cafe is closed, so you couldn't get that. But other than that, it's mostly predictable. There's no change, there's no evolution happening there. Now that is not how today's world works, right? Like today's world, we talked about VUCA, it is changing every day. That zoo was a world that was probably a few decades ago.
And it was fantastic because between the animals was an iron cage. So the alligators were never going to eat the kangaroos. Now, what Sonia Blinio talks about is the better metaphor for today and going forward for the next 20 years is safari in the jungle. That's what we're navigating now. No concrete paths. If you can identify the wild animals in this, you're doing really well. They are there. I found them eventually, but the terms and conditions of a safari in the jungle are completely different to your experience at the zoo. And you don't get any guarantee that you see any animals at all. I mean, there's some weird interdependencies going on where the hyenas are eating what was left over from the lions. And the sense of danger and your alertness are the key characteristics of even enjoying this, with no guarantee you come back having a photograph of any animal at all. Imagine, taking a 4-year-old on a safari. That would be massively risky. And the real drama is you just don't see the animals. You don't see the threats. And they might be as dramatic as our amazing elephant here coming out of the bush, attacking the 4-wheel drive, and that would be a bit of a shocking experience. But, in our context, in a business context, that's Amazon, that's Google, that's Facebook, or like for poor old realestate.com.au at the moment, my beloved company of so long. So Microsoft Bing have just established a global development center in China, which Ma Chang kindly gave me the lead on, where they're building Bing Rentals, a global rental platform, because they've identified the margins available in that industry and the poor process absolutely in need of a complete renovation. Now that is the revenue line of so much of the global traditional property industry. It's like, whoa, where'd that elephant come from? But it might also be the monkeys. We've got a few monkeys here tonight who come in, jump all over, steal your camera. That's the startups and the scale-ups of the jungle. And you really need some great observational skills and resilience to survive in this kind of environment.
That's very interesting, Nigel, because earlier this year, I went to India and I had an opportunity to go on a safari in the jungles of Karnataka. And this is actually a real picture, because what Nigel mentioned, I experienced.
It looks like a picture taken under stress by the amount of...
What happens when an elephant chases your Jeep, right? That's shaky picture, but then all of that stress. And that was a real thing, because there was that unknown that we talked about in safari. You don't know what's going to happen. And yes, you expected to see animals. That would have been a great thing. You don't expect to get chased by the animals, right? You hear the stories, but not going to happen to you. But it did happen. And the fear that it instigates, because you are there, you don't know what's going to happen next. You don't know what direction to take, because these are wild animals. You don't know what to expect there, right? And akin to that, I would like to also talk about what happened in one of the gigs that I was at, where the CEO came to me and he wanted to know the dates of a certain milestone. And he wanted to have that conversation. He wanted the milestone dates, because he wanted to then go and announce it to all the customers that he had. So he wanted to make a big announcement based on my commitment to the dates, right? And now how do I commit to a date? I can commit to things, I can put things in, I can give facts and figures and talk about risks associated with it, but I cannot give him the date. But he was charging towards me. And that feeling of being chased by that elephant in a Jeep was very similar to being chased or being charged by a CEO who wanted to know the details right then and there.
So executives are elephants. I resemble that remark. Grey,
I didn't
large,
say that, you did.
Old. And look, I've done that myself. I've unreasonably asked for certainty, yet equally, I know the answer is it depends. And but there's no rationalizing with elephants. So this is the stopping point. This is our hypothesis, that we are now navigating in a jungle What options do we have to make that easier? What mindsets, what approaches, how are we going to do this?
Well, certainly not with big program offices. And that is where Obeya comes into picture.
The biggest problem with an Obeya is it's got the word obey in it, which it just doesn't translate well. It couldn't be further from the truth in that sense. It's my experience with it is as having come to it as the director of the Lean Enterprise Institute and having seen this amazing kind of 5,000 meter flying level of a big picture of the business, is that it goes way back. My favorite examples are from World War II. So have you ever been a tourist? Remember that? We used to fly internationally and go and visit places. Well, in London, there's an amazing museum underneath 10 Downing Street, which was the cabinet war rooms from World War II. And in that room there is the most remarkable reconstruction, because it's not a reconstruction. They closed it after the war and reopened it in the 70s, and nobody had dusted it since. And they put some characters in there, but there you see the visualization of the entire European front with all of the troop movements, and around that table was a multidisciplinary group of all of the military characters concerned. So the first time in the history of war, you had the Army, Navy, Air Force in the same room with civilian advisors. Every other war to that point had been fought with those separated out as functions and trying desperately to communicate. Precedent was the Battle of Britain with the incredibly visualized work on the scale of those battles. And that didn't last that long, much to people's surprise. And then I've got my own experience, particularly in a volatile workplace, with the growth of the REA group from 2011 to 2019, which is a 10x growth in all the things, which is pretty chaotic kind of a jungle to navigate
Absolutely.
through.
Yeah. And just to put the perspective around what Obeya itself means, Japanese, taken from a Japanese word, it means large room, essentially because it was established in a big room, all of those visualization and everything. But in essence, what it means is a physical or digital workspace where strategy meets execution. That's very important. Digital, because in the recent times, obviously, but strategy meets execution is where all of the essence of Obeya lies. And that's where it also differentiates it with a regular Kanban. It enables sustainable and inclusive decision-making. Now, what's sustainable decision-making? It's about keeping all the perspectives in mind and making decisions towards the longer-term goal. It's not reactive. It's not for doing something and fixing something right now, right here. It's thinking about what's your strategy and how your decision is going to impact the overall strategy. And then inclusive, having all different perspectives. And we are going to talk about a bit more philosophy where we'll see how important it is to have different perspectives come together, because that's going to make your Obeya success or a failure.
So it wasn't until I got involved in the lean movement and started getting invited to really interesting outsider type events, like in healthcare. So I had the incredible luck of being invited to Stanford Children's Hospital to look at an Obeya process there to help solve problems within it in their MRI unit, where every time they added an MRI machine, which was worth about the gross domestic product of New Zealand, productivity and throughput in the unit went down 10%, which just seemed so illogical. So we were solving that problem. We went to the Obeya to see it. And it just reminded me of the stakes that some of us have in our work. So the stakes in that case were children's lives. The stakes at REA Group were a photo of a secondhand house didn't get on a website for a day when we didn't all align with the work or got our priorities wrong. But it is a life and death scale tool that it really can be incredibly useful to getting people on the same page. That only works in healthcare. Amy Edmondson's work around psychological safety, some of that research was done at Stanford Children's. And it's this environment that is a safe place to speak up because something is wrong that we'll talk about in a minute. But very ancient philosophy.
Yeah.
Now, I wanted to just stop here for a minute because I want to talk about what Obeya is not. So we've had big walls, and I've built big walls that have actually not been in the spirit of Obeya at all. These are entirely political symbols of control. These are to make you feel incredibly small and a tiny part of it, and remind you someone's in charge. This is a command and control wall. And so differentiating between this kind of a visualized wall of work and an Obeya is really, really important for you to be able to walk away with today.
Yeah, so let's move from Roman philosophy to Confucius philosophy. Now, I have been practicing Obeya for quite some time now, but the philosophy is relatively new to me. And it's only when you understand the philosophy, the essence of Obeya is realized. Otherwise, it would be all charts and graphs and a lot of things on the walls, but without any actual essence of it. So let's get into the philosophy, which makes the foundation of Obeya. So the first one is Kokorozashi, which is purpose is everything. Now, we talked about strategy meets execution earlier. Purpose, in 11th century in Japan, there was a samurai, very famous samurai called Yoshida Shoin, who said that a person without any purpose is an insect. It sounds very philosophical and very existential, but what we have seen in a lot of organizations, when people cannot relate to the work or the purpose of the organization, they feel disconnected, and that often becomes the reason they quit the organization. So this forms the basis of Obeya, and you will see that that's the very first thing we do when we start putting the Obeya together. The second one is Shiko Goitsu, which is knowledge is action. Now, if it's about translating that knowledge into action, and you will see that in Obeya as well. If you have knowledge and you do not take any action, that is useless. That knowledge is useless. It's not going anywhere. But if you take action without any knowledge, it's nearly a very dangerous waste of effort, because you're just reacting without knowing all the different perspectives. So that's the second one.
And thanks to the Toyota Management Institute, which we're both members of the Obeya Institute that is associated with them, that we've got this amazing 7-category philosophy of Obeya. I'm familiar with the next two because they're core lean. So Genchi Genbutsu, actual place, actual things. Go to the place of the work to solve the problems. Do not sit in your office looking at a spreadsheet, a Miro, or some kind of reporting system. Go into find the people where the problem took place. And that means in this case, an Obeya needs to be central to your work. It can't be off in a remote room, which we talk about at times where there's a secret Obeya that only the executives have. That's not really in the spirit of this kind of thing. But it needs to be central to the work, although it's not the Kanban board, which you'll explain later on. And Jidoka, the place to see the abnormalities. So Jidoka is automation. It's systems that stop when something fails because you built the kind of human machine interface into it. And the Obeya is the place where you can call those abnormalities out, or they're spotted. Oh, that doesn't really go with that. You can't have both of those by that time because that's the same team. That is exactly how an Obeya should function.
Yeah, and the next two are very closely related, and especially Omotenashi, which means creating something great together, is my favorite one, because it talks about having different roles and different perspectives coming together. And it's not going to be a linear transaction. It has to have different perspectives. And that's where we say, when you have Obeya, it's not PMO's job to just manage Obeya, or it is not just for your executive team. It is for different roles, different perspectives, and different hats, people wearing different hats coming together and having that conversation. It takes its essence from the tea ceremony that is held in Japan, where people from different kind of perspectives come in, they look at the process, they talk about the process, and it is one, and then that relates very closely to the Ichigo Ichie, which is one meeting at a time. So the way it relates is that when you're coming together, you're just thinking about one thing, living in the moment, talking about things there in the room. You're not having multiple meetings with multiple people in silos. It's all coming together there.
Which is the thing we all, and I'm sure there's people in the room, suffer from that. You know, this is being repeated across 3 different meetings. Is there the opportunity to do it in the one place?
Absolutely.
And the dojo, the way of management, I'm married into a Kung Fu family, so dojo is a very familiar term to me and probably to some of you as well. But in terms of a place to practice Kung Fu, that's one thing. A place to practice management's very interesting take on that, because you've got people coming together, and we don't get to practice management much at all. So this is a place to have conversations, to ensure people have their say, the work is flowing. The actual essence of management is done here. And that is a purpose of the Obeya, because you think about it, where did you learn to do management? Well, it wasn't from a book, and maybe you got an MBA. It was in the place. And this is a very structured and healthy and safe place to learn management.
Absolutely. Right. We're going to talk about the overall big picture of that cascade of communication. So we talked about strategy, which is what you see here. So creating an organization strategy is very important because that's where you get your purpose from. Now, there are different ways of doing it. We are not going to get into details of that today. Hoshin Kanri or lean value tree is something that we have done a lot of that. Nigel is an expert of that as well. So you can grab him for a separate talk. But also a lot of people do OKRs, and there could be different ways. I'm pretty sure each of the organizations, if not these frameworks would have some presentations or some strategy documents somewhere where the organization strategies definitely exist. But that's not what we are going to talk about, but that's the first thing that we create as part of the OBEA. Now, this is where all of the alignment of that execution happens. So you've got the strategy. How do you align your entire organization around that strategy to actually make that happen? And this is where we talk about different kind of complex walls, portfolio program walls, where strategy is actually meeting the execution. We talk about dependencies, blockers. We see different representations from throughout the organization. And the last one that you see here is most of you would have seen this as a Kanban board, whether in Trello or somewhere else. But this is where most of the work happens in terms of connecting people together, and what execution looks like, what your day-to-day work management is going to look like. So just want to draw a contrast here between Kanban and OBEA. Kanban, while it is focused on what you do day-to-day, it is not focused on the overall strategy of the work. This is where we are getting the strategy to meet the execution. And this is where we are talking about all your different streams. Are they aligned to the goals or not? And then it is more focused on the broadest set of things. So Kanban might be team specific. This becomes much broader than that.
I'm flying into Sydney yesterday. We've been in Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne with this talk. I was reminded of that dastardly but quite brilliant agile method called flight levels, which some of you would have heard of, not one of ours. But it's the simplicity of it says that people are flying along or existing on the ground level. And I could see those from the plane in Sydney. You could see the cars, and someone having an experience of the life in Sydney on the motorway level wasn't particularly good that morning, but crowded traffic, all those kind of things. That's one experience of work. We're at 5,000 feet, and that's where the OBEA lives. And I can see the vast interchange. I can see huge amounts of dependencies and interactions going on. All the things are there, and that's a really good metaphor. Damn it, that's a good metaphor for where OBEA sits in this sort of thing. Now we got a prize tonight, haven't we? And a pub quiz. Here you are. That's very cool. What is statistically the most dangerous land mammal in the world? Choo! We got the young fellow at the front here. Got hippo in first.
We're gonna have to get probably more of these.
We'll get a second cup for you, sir. We're
going to pass it on.
It's a cup and a pair of socks with ThoughtWorks on them, which is fantastic. Now, how many people were killed by hippos last year? Over 500 people were killed by hippos last year. And, you know, a 3-ton monster like this charging you down. We talked about, you know, CEOs charging you down, big gray elephants charging you down. Now I've got hippos charging you down.
Well, that's very interesting, Nigel, because I think most of us are charged down by the hippos, and most of our prioritization goes down the drain because of the hippos, which are highest paid people's opinion, right? So that's what usually happens. And I'm pretty sure everyone in that room has experienced that at some point of the time or the other.
Well, as this next photograph shows, as some of us have been hippos as well. And this is this photograph I took from my collection of a time we were at REA Group trying to institute a new org structure and a new way of working with, I mean, ThoughtWorks was a huge part of that. So I can count at least 1, 2, 3 hippos, and I'm the hippo behind the counter. We are the highest paid people, and we have an opinion. But equally, it crosses over to that slide, the Confucius philosophy slide. The purpose of us doing this and creating OBEAs for each line of business, residential, commercial real estate, property developer real estate, was to develop the management skills of the groups who are running those things. This is a dojo. As much as it's a kind of how are we making progress, how are the outcomes going, we kind of had a secondary purpose. I just wish I'd been able to explain that in a OBEA sense back then. It was kind of an instinctive thing that we did, knowing we had a rapidly growing organization.
Yeah. So let's look at how we move away from hippo to have more meaningful conversations. So this is one of the ways we set up OBAs. This is not the only way. This is not what we are recommending that you should be. That's where you should do. We have done it using this and then multiple different flavors of it. Found it to be good starting point. So let's get started with that. On the left, what you see here is the strategy. Now, like I said, strategy can come in different forms and shapes. It could be LVT. What we have taken here is lean value tree approach. So you have got different visions, goals, and bets, and then those strategic bets get converted to hypotheses, initiatives. So you would have something here which is basically going to align with the goal of the organization, or in larger organizations, sometimes you're doing it at vertical level. So each of that organization goal will then come to the verticals, and then verticals are obviously cross-functional. So then that gets aligned.
One of the subtleties of that I love about the rules of Abaya is that if a customer wandered into this room, they would not be pissed off. That they would look at this and go, you know what, they're doing the right things by me. And this describes things that will be of benefit to me. So does it pass the test of a customer says, make millions of dollars out of increasing the price for basic services to customers is not a vision that they're going to love.
Yeah, absolutely. Then where we get to the next is, if you think about the double diamond approach, this is where we are exploring a lot of things. We are running different initiatives to see what could work. There are different hypotheses we'll run. We may continue to get into the solution mode with that, or we may pivot there. But these are some different things that we want to do to get to these goals. Then we move on to the teams. Now, it's very, very important to have the entire representation, truly cross-functional representation here, whether it is at organization level or whether it is at your vertical level. Now, what could happen is where OBA fails, or the dark side of OBA is where people just put tech and delivery teams in there. I've got all my teams here. I've got 5 different teams. They are all dependent on each other. I've got representation. Here you go. Perfect OBA. Is it though? There comes marketing team, changes everything, because they're running a campaign which tech teams and delivery teams were not aware of, right? So you need a very cross-functional team, whether it is marketing, whether it is your legal compliance, because it has happened in one of the previous clients where they were trying to run certain experiments, and they went ahead with full steam on the experiments, took the initiative, went ahead with the delivery teams, and there came a compliance change. And this was in health industry, where they had to pivot because that became the most important point where they had to put all of their energy. So they never involved their compliance team early on to figure out what needs to be done. So their OBA, they had an OBA, but that did not represent the right things. Then comes, once you get to the team level, that's where your different initiatives start taking shape. That what are the initiatives which teams would actually work on? And then we talk about dependencies and the overall view of what's coming in the pipeline and those kind of things. But I'll like to draw some attention on this side, because we talked about knowledge, which is translated into action. Now, you've got all of this knowledge of what's happening. Now, it's very important to know there are dependencies here, and we'll see in some of the examples in upcoming slides. But there would be certain blockers there. There would be bottlenecks. And what's most important is to talk about those and then translate into action items. You get action items here, you get the solution here. You talk about the problem, and then there are all of those people who should be solving are in that room represented there. So that solution should come out of this conversation. There should not be 5 different meetings happening to get to that solution. You can get into details of that in different meetings. So I'm not saying that everything is resolved here, but you get to an agreement, because often we have seen that you have different conversations in silos, and then do you understand what I said? Yes, 100% agreed, but they have not all talked to each other. So there's really no agreement. And then overall team health. We talked about alignment of what you're doing, what is the purpose to overall work that you're doing to the main purpose. This is where you will track all of that. If you see your team health is going down, something is wrong. Now, there could be multiple reasons, but one of the reasons that we have observed as a trend is when people do not feel that connection with the work that they're trying to do. And that's where this trend is going to be really key. Some examples from real life scenarios, some of the clients we have worked over the period of time. Now, this is where, we talked about for team leaders and for a lot of other folks, understanding the dependencies, what's not working out, understanding the blockers is really key. And this is super complex set of project or program of work where we had at least 12 different teams coming together, different cultures coming together. Very key to understand what we are all working towards. Everyone has one single view of and where we are heading towards, and then understanding the dependency. It creates a lot of the conversation to figure out how do we resolve these dependencies. We're not all working on our own plans. We have one plan to work on, and how do we move ahead with that plan? A lot of good conversations there. Now, you could use this for your weekly conversations to understand the dependencies. You can also use that previous version to talk about, fortnightly, to talk about the prioritization, because all the teams are represented here. So talk about at an organization level, are we working on the right set of priorities or not? So that's very key here.
Now, it's a bit of an effort to persuade those people who haven't traditionally been involved in this kind of work to come to the table, to be fair. And I think back to my REA experience of getting marketing and sales and compliance and legal to come to the table, to come to those meetings and believe that that was important to them, when that has not, they'd all learned traditional management along the way. No, they're the gatekeepers at the end of the process and would happily send the work all the way back to the start for a complete failure to have a compliance or privacy form done correctly. That is just not productive. And it's actually very, very discouraging for the psychology of people who do the work.
Yeah. This is the example from good old days when we could actually put things on the wall and tear them apart if it didn't work out. Something to notice here is that we had this column for value. Now, this was really a very key conversation starter, because what do you consider as value? If you have delivered whatever was required on time, is that value? Or if you have delivered, doesn't matter on time or not, but your customer is finding, it's something is moving. You have got a baseline setup, whether it is NPS, whether it is acquisition, retention, something is moving in there on the positive side. Is that going to be considered as value?
And in the absence of progress on those value metrics, people become obsessed with what they can see changing. So suddenly delivery milestones or feature milestones or those kind of things take over people's mindsets of what success and progress becomes. Worked with a client who's in exactly that state where the Dalton project was taking so long, they forgot what the business value was going to be or what the metrics they were chasing entirely, and celebrated success in a massive party when they actually managed to launch it. They should be celebrating success when they actually acquired the first customers using that feature.
Yeah. Well, this one is not so pretty version, but what it also indicates is that while OBE is about, we talked about the wall and everything, it's very important to have data points as well. This talks about different cycle times, time to market, and all of that trend that we had sort of mapped over the period of time. And that's really key input in making certain decisions. It also enables you to make some of the budget decisions when you're looking at where your different, how much time it is taking you and how long it is going to.
Well, clearly I did not click the your time is up thing. I better do that right now.
Yeah, perfect. Some data in there as well, right? So from not so pretty version, here's the prettiest version. I think this is one of the prettiest one we had done, Nigel.
This is beautiful. And I've actually seen this when I was invited as an elder of the Agile community in Australia to come and inspect the beauty of this particular wall. And we won't be speculating as to who it is, but the layout was incredible. The space they'd taken, it flows left to right. All the purposes are on the left, down to all the way, right the way through to dependencies and teams. And it was amazing, but it has a gigantic fault associated with it. Any guesses what that might be? No, I'm very happy with the analog nature of that. And hybrids, our model world. What's missing here, and you can't see it, it's a trick question, is the context of the culture of the organization. So this organization at this point in time is undertaking this whole project so they can lose 20% of their staff. And that is the worst kept secret in the entire organization, that they have moved to Agile to reduce the staff headcount by 20%, as promised by a giant but unnamed international consulting company. So the effort goes to have the most amount of work on your Obeya, so they can't possibly lay you off because you are most important person. Oh my goodness, we are so busy in our Obeya. You can't possibly lay us off. And there was 5 of these, each competing to not be laid off. That is so far against the philosophy of Obeya that I give this one 1 point out of 10. These all get 10 out of 10, of course, because they're on
that's where Nigel.
Yeah, these are from my history in the REA group. There's the hippos joining. This one, I mean, this was one of the biggest things we did, is a re-platforming of search. 15 different squads from across the business coming together. That's it. That is the management wall. That is the Obeya wall for an $80 million investment. And people used to kind of thought, no, surely there's got to be like an incredible amount of governance on that. Nope, we visualized it. They met daily, and that thing had its ups and its downs. We just had just enough psychological safety that people would call bullshit on things, and we got a pretty risk-free delivery as a result. We have different shapes and styles. We stole that one from ThoughtWorks, like the radar, and that is actually an Obeya around our call center for what is coming that's being delivered at an enterprise level that they need to know about. Obeya, scores and numbers. This is really important because this is an opportunity to get grown up about what numbers truly count in delivery of products and value for customers. How much is it costing to run a team? And I find that's a very poorly understood metric, but when you make people literate in that, they go, okay, well, this team's costing $100,000 a week to run. People's mindset instantly changes to value. You go, wow, I wouldn't spend $100,000 doing that. I'd fix that tech debt and stop all the outages. And those are the grown-up Obeya conversations. This one, his customer sat, that's a great number. And this is my dreadful record of my moment of absolute humbling about Obeya. So this is Sarah Hunter-Neal showing some very exalted guests around REA Group, including this bloke, Jim Womack, who invented the word lean in the machine that changed the world. Came in and he said, okay, well, you seem to be doing good with your agile thingy. Let's give it the Toyota test. And that is to take a card from this wall with someone's photograph on it doing work and take it to that person who's easily identified from it and give it to you and ask you, how does this relate to the purpose of REA, which we knew intimately, changing the way the world experiences property? I still haven't forgotten it. And so how does it serve customers? And my beloved software developer answered completely honestly, I have no idea. I just got told to do that at stand-up this morning. Now, in the lean world, honesty gets you more points than the correct answer, because that is culturally a massive thing. And we set out to build our capability, like the Womack test was at any time, take a card from an Obeya and ask someone who's working on that initiative, or it works at Kanban level as well, does it align?
Yeah.
So yeah, those are my holiday picks, that's for sure.
Yeah. So just to give a recap of what we talked about today and what's the value that this Obeya brings in. I think the most important one for me, Nigel, is it breaks down the silos. I've experienced on almost all the client projects where there's silos of conversations happening. And often the job is to just make sure that people are coming together. And I think this is a very wonderful way to get people together, getting different mindset. And that's where I said that Omotenashi is my favorite philosophy from Obeya, because it's getting different perspectives and different people in different roles together, but having all the roles represented in there so that we can have a really good conversation about the work that's coming. We're all working towards the same goal. So it's not the conversation of you have screwed up, so things are not working out. Sorry for. And
you've let down all of these other people on this gigantic board, like red.
So how do we change that conversation?
Yeah, and that's a bit of that elephant charging psychology as well. It's like pretty hard to not kind of fight or flight in that mode. And there's something magical about the psychology of a visualized piece of work. It's a little bit hard to replicate in Miro, but it's possible. And that's when I, charge Prachi. Well, so when's this going to be delivered? When's it coming? Like, give me a date. Don't mess me around.
Yeah.
And it's like instant, the psychology is one-upping, and I'm demanding stuff that's not actually possible to say, versus you and me looking at a wall shoulder to shoulder.
Yeah, and
we triangulate the problem.
Yeah, and it's the conversation which moves to, hey, Nigel, look at all of these things. These are the facts. What do you think? When is this going to be done? So it's changing the conversation and having more meaningful conversations, which is, I think, the most important thing. There are a lot of other things that you get out of it, but I think that is a mindset change that we talk about.
Yeah. And that doesn't happen overnight either. That takes a sense of psychological safety to create. I mean, it's actually quite hard to create a vision that everyone wants to sign up to and chase and feels there's value in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow, we hit the end. Question time.
I do have one though.
Sure.
What is that picture about?
Look, well, this is probably the last mystery. So, I do love a metaphor and a dad joke accordingly. So we've been in the jungle, the business jungle, right? But there's another extra metaphor I love, is that the difference between where business is at now, that all the things you're involved in, it's like the difference between playing chess and playing poker. Chess, I can see the whole board. I know the rules. They've been there for thousands of years. No random dice throw removes my queen. Modern business, not only just like the jungle, it's like poker. I can see in a 4-hand game, 25% of the cards. I don't know what card is coming, and I need to learn to manage with that environment. So this is what the future is.
No wonder I love poker.
Yeah, you like poker. I like chess, and I just can't. But yes, exactly. You're a great card player, and that's what makes you good at running a bar.
Well, that's all we had for today, but we are happy to take any questions.
Yeah.
As far as a framework, there's a lot of parallels between that and SAFE. What distinguishes a Bayer from the other large scale?
I find myself channeling Martin Fowler and having a kind of scaled agile. What does he call it? Scaled agile framework for something not mentionable. It's the philosophy that's different. So I have a drawing of the history of work, which puts SAFE as probably the last incarnation of what Taylor and Ford started, a mechanistic approach to a command and control element of complex programs. So the cultural element is completely different. Henry Ford had this brilliant thing where it's like, I love hiring a new pair of hands. I just wish it wouldn't come with a brain attached. And the piecework that's involved in release trains or planning PI, all those kind of elements, just reminds me of the spirit of that. And I want the Japanese approach, where I want this 3.5 inches not left in your locker, but absolutely focused on improving the work. And that's the fundamental difference. They're all structured, and there is more gated elements to SAFE than you would probably find in the use of this. And a Bayer is only a tiny element of the ground that SAFE attempts to cover all the way to working code. It's that 5,000 meter view over Sydney, watching the traffic flows and people go to school and all those elements. So for me, it's the spirit. I think that's what's actually made SAFE a difficult implementation for many companies, is that sense of having completed the training, got the certificate and signed up for the $400 registration and just feeling like a cog in the wheel.
Okay, I've got the box. So I'm not a manager, by the way, I'm a terrible manager. But I can imagine this for like an organization that has like a couple of key things that they're trying to do. What about like just some gigantic company and like one particular work area might just be working on a completely unrelated set of projects. Lots of little projects that like they deliver a bit of value over there, deliver a little bit of value over there, completely different. I mean,
yeah, certainly we have done something for that level of organization, one of the financial institutes. There are two approaches to do that. One is that if you have different verticals or business units within the big organization, then at organization level, you'll still have the strategy. That's where, again, going back to Hoshin Kanri or something of that sort, which exists at organization level. But then this OBEA exists. So you take the goals from that or different bets and strategies from that. And then you go to each of the business unit and create business unit level OBEA. So not every business unit might be at that level of creating that, but that's it comes. And we have done it recently on one of the clients where we set it up for each of the verticals. Now, it has to come back together. So yes, you're having conversations, somebody's taking the goals and then driving. Each of those verticals had a couple of goals to drive, and then their OBEA was mapped around that. Then you go back to the broader conversation of how is it all meeting the strategy from different vertical perspective. You also see the progress towards the goal. So it's not about achieving something at the end, but how are you progressing towards the goal?
Does it only make sense if it's applied to like enough of a business unit or company or something?
No, that would help you to get the broader vision. But if organization strategy existing is really key, but then from that strategy, if it goes to one business unit or one vertical just doing that OBEA and others not really to that level, that is still okay, because within that vertical, you are still making decisions which are more cross-functional, true to your vertical. And then it will help you track progress of one of those goals. Your business overall and your organization is not getting all the details of that OBEA or all the details of how each and every goal is progressing, but there's enough to talk about a couple of goals there.
And it reminds me of one of the anti-patterns of OBEA, which is people get, oh, let's just put the project and investment work on there. Let's not put the BAU work on there.
Very key.
And if you don't do that, people get a completely unrealistic view of what you are doing in your area. I think the main barrier to adoption is the absolute fear that if we put it up on a board, our work, somebody will criticize it. And somebody might have some suggestions, and one of the teams who are dependent on us might not agree with the prioritization we've created. It's getting comfortable with having those conversations and not hiding that fact from them until the last minute. Particularly, I mean, I've had some pretty bad battle scars from marketing, walking in at the last minute and things, well, you can't do that. Well, we've just spent 6 months building those features. Well, it's no use until we've done the television campaign. And so we toggle off $500,000 worth of work we just spent 6 months doing.
And I guess that's just key because we didn't involve marketing at the start when we were making these prioritization calls, these decisions. And that's why it is not throwing it across the wall to marketing to sort of sign off. It is about coming together and looking at the work. So it's you versus me conversation, taking it to let's look at the work and how do we come together as a group.
Yeah, you're the executive, yes. So you get to go first. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I'm just a musician.
Yeah.
Thank you. Why haven't I heard of OBEA before? Over the past decade, I've had Agile, Lean, Six Sigma, Waterfall, PMBOK, everything. Feels like there's a bit of a rotation. Lean's having a resurgence. Haven't heard this term before. Feels familiar. Some of those pictures, I've done things similar.
Yeah.
Is this? It seems like it might be 1,000 years old in some ways, but probably comes from Toyota in the 60s in other ways. Why is it relevant now and why didn't I know about it before?
It's relevant today because the web and you have made the most VUCA world we could possibly imagine. Andreessen said like 10 years ago that software would eat the world, and it did, and it was not good. So the level of complexity we have concreted into modern day businesses is now so astonishing that we need to look back into history for tools that are good navigation tools for VUCA. You know, I'm one of the kind of 7 ambassadors of Lean left alive under the age of 60. It's a disaster that we have not brought this into a world of modern business. If you go to Toyota or any Japanese company, these are everywhere. But bringing it out and using it in this sense, we've done terribly as a Lean movement. We have not competed with SAFe. We have not competed with flight levels. We have not competed with Kanban and every other methodology which has taken the oxygen out of work and work methods for the last 20 years. ThoughtWorks is kind of about blending all of those things. You've certainly seen Kanban boards. I mean, Trello, Jira, all those kind of tools, those kind of things. And you probably, OKRs would have taken care of a lot of companies cascading their goals down to teams accordingly. But it's this mid-flight level that is really interesting now as a missing piece we see to get people aligned. Oh, past the purple quad there.
He thinks my favorite Andreessen quote is on his daily habits. He drinks, it was like caffeine for 10 hours, alcohol for 4.
Yeah. Probably got the ratio the wrong way around, I think. Yeah.
Did I like in terms of interpreting like a really, really large organization, did you, like, should we have an obeyer of obeyers roll up in a hierarchy? Or like when we're, you know, if marketing isn't in the room, is it a fault of our implementation of it, or did we just not acknowledge that we do need to break things down to hierarchy to make sense of things, so fold them back up?
I think this is where the clever work comes in, is understanding the domains of an organization. I mean, I've had obeyers because I've been passionate about lean for a long time. I mean, our little startup of 7 of us has an obeyer. And it's there labeled that, and it's just, I mean, how hard can it be to coordinate 7 part-timers? And really actually quite hard accordingly, but clarity about our vision and goals, because we're constantly arguing over enterprise or B2B or, well, how the hell are we going to sell this thing? That's been really, really productive for us, I think. Any thoughts?
I think in terms of what you're asking about, do we have the obeyer of obeyer? That is where the organization strategies come into picture. So that's at organization level, but then sometimes you have smaller divisions, business units, verticals, whatever you call them, and then they have their own obeyers. So that all needs to come together at the organization strategy level. If the organizations are too big, then there are multiple obeyers which come together, but it has to then align back to the organization strategy. So your purpose always stays the constant, which drives everything else.
I suppose that's the question. Like, at some point, does the obeyer get too complex and it needs to be broken down into smaller parts?
And this is actually, that's the crux point of this whole thing, is because abstracting away the complexity, which methodologies tend to do and frameworks tend to do, is the disaster we face. So simple things that we treated as an absolute understood in technology for 20 years, root cause analysis. There are no root causes left in complex organizations, things interacting with other things into other things. The clever bit's understanding the domains and defining, well, what's a sensible space to have an obeyer and get a group of people around. And it might be within your org structure. Yeah. It might be that technology has an obeyer that runs across multiple business lines or otherwise. And this is where I unapologetically go, actually, we all have to lean into that complexity. I spent the 80s and 90s, KISS, keep it simple, stupid.
Not going to work anymore.
Ruining organizations and not delivering giant programs of technology. It just took a bit of a wake-up call in America to figure that out.
We have to accept that there is complexity and we'll have to deal with that. So the obeyers will not get into the details of everything, single thing, then it will be a level where we can have enough information to make the decision. It has to be at that level.
It requires a new generation of leaders to lean into what makes their companies tick. So if you've got a CEO who has a zero empathy for the work of coders, and yet your business is highly dependent on software, you've got a big gap. And really the way to sell obeyer in that sense is risk management.
Any other questions?
It's a Thursday night in the city. There's bars to be hit. There's dinner to be had.
Like an organization, it's like, I don't know if it's a quote from somewhere. I can't remember where I heard it. An organization's ability to deal with complexities, to visualize it all at once. But if you can't see the moving parts or the hidden moving parts, then you can't deal with it. So,
and this is where we have to sort of unhide those things, right? And that's where we say, find what is, BAU is a very good example of it, where we actually, one of these slides where we have put things together and said that BAU wasn't there. And then everything else, which they were working on, different things, different cool things, was all represented. And then they realized that still we are not able to make this work because most of our team's energy is going into BAU, which is not even represented here. So, unhiding those things, it is not going to happen on day one. So when you set up your OBI, it's all perfectly fine. It is going to be an evolving thing. You'll figure out there are things that you did not consider are not represented. So you'll have versions and versions of it as you understand more complexity within the organization.
And one of the dramas is it looks like a lot of labor. So it's, who's did the PMO maintain this thing? Who turns up to put the cards on the wall or adjust the Miro every week?
Yeah, so it is initially somebody needs to come together, a couple of folks would need to come together to set it up. But once it is set up, it is not one person's or one role's sort of responsibility to maintain it and to do things around it. It has to be each of those representations who come together to move things around, to put new things there, new ideas coming on. Let's make sure that it is represented there. So it is a collective responsibility. However, the facilitation of conversation is one person's responsibility, only because it requires a bit of skill set to make sure that right conversations are happening. Otherwise, the dark side of OBEA, where you have the wall and the conversation goes back to status update. Everyone is coming to the wall, not having right conversations, just saying, hey, we are tracking well, we've got new things. It's no use. You might as well go back to the old methods then.
What situation?
I think so. A startup. At our startup, we just had a Trello wall to start with. Thank you, Atlassian, wonderful organization. And that was enough. There were tasks moving left to right, and there were 3 of us. The moment that got above 3, we suddenly had a coordination and a roles and responsibilities. And we're part-timers. It's a hobby. Suddenly that became capacity to need the Obeya, and we had to agree, actually, what is our future state that we're aiming for in the next 12 and 24 months? You'd be surprised how variable that can be. And a lot of, I mean, we work in all sorts of sizes of organizations. I reckon you get more than 15 people, you definitely need to have this as a monthly conversation and coming back to it. Whether you...
I would think, Nigel, it's less about people. I think it's about the complexity of the work. If it is super simple work, you're just doing the same thing repetitively again and again, maybe overkill. But if the level of complexity increases, you have multiple things happening, multiple teams coming together, that's where it gets most of that value out of that.
Yeah, and that's where we get to the advanced Obeya practices of Toyota, where continuous improvement is one of the reasons for doing this.
Yeah.
And I don't see that regularly practiced, where most Western organizations are just trying to get to being a smooth and relatively well-functioning flow of product value.
Any other questions?
Well, we could answer questions over a wine and...
100%.
Yeah.
However, please give us some feedback. Any kind of feedback is welcome. There's a QR code there and you can connect with us. We have got our email IDs up there if you want to connect. If you want help in setting up your OBEA, we are more than happy to have a chit chat around that.
Put your credit card into the website and off we go. No, we love to. We're interested in what sort of problems people are trying to solve.
Absolutely.
And whether these tools can help them. We're not interested in making more paperwork for people. Yeah. There is enough reporting and all those things in the world. So it has to be a net value. And that's why we're so passionate about it, because we've both seen it work.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Thank you, everyone, for coming here tonight and spending your evening with us. Really appreciate your time and effort.